Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. You know, we love to get our teeth into some juicy self-help, and today we're diving deep into, well, how to talk to pretty much anyone.
Sounds like a valuable skill.
Oh, it is. It is. It's his book by Leo Lowndes called How to Talk to Anyone. And buckle up, because she's got some opinions. We're starting with the preface and part 3 today.
And I have a feeling she doesn't hold back, does she?
Oh, not one bit. See, she's got this whole framework of you're either a big cat or well, you get the picture.
Okay, big cat versus, not so big cat. I'm intrigued.
Right. So she's saying, like, in the jungle, tigers size each other up right away, figure out who's who in the hierarchy. She's saying we do the same thing, humans, especially with first impressions.
Oh, absolutely. Those split-second judgments, we all make them.
But here's the kicker, and this one really made me think. She says 85% of our success in life, like straight-up success, is tied to communication skills. 85%.
Wow, that's a huge number. Makes you realize how much we rely on those skills, doesn't it? Not just in our careers, but relationships, everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in that situation where you felt instantly judged based on just like that initial conversation? Or, maybe been the one doing the judging?
Oh, all the time. I think it's natural to form those first impressions, but being aware of that process is so important.
Right. And speaking of judgments, Lowndes, well, she has some strong thoughts on a pretty common question, one that I bet we've all asked, what do you do?
Oh, the classic networking question. I can already sense there's more to it than meets the eye.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. What's wrong with wanting to know someone's profession? Get a sense of what they're all about.
Well, Lance argues that for some people, that question can feel, well, a bit insensitive, especially if they're between jobs, or maybe they're a stay-at-home parent.
I see, like you're pigeonholing them based on a job title.
Exactly. And it can make them feel like their value is tied solely to their work, which isn't always the case, right?
Right, not at all. So what does she suggest instead?
She suggests a much more open-ended approach. Instead of what do you do, try asking, how do you spend most of your time?
Oh, I like that. It opens the door for a much wider range of responses.
Exactly. It lets the other person share what's truly important to them, whether that's their work, their hobbies, or anything else they're passionate about.
It's like giving them the space to define themselves on their own terms, which I think can lead to a much more genuine connection.
Absolutely. And this leads perfectly into another one of Lowndes' concepts, something she calls the nutshell resume.
Oh yeah, this is a good one. It's basically like having a concise and compelling elevator pitch, but for yourself.
Exactly. And she stresses that you wouldn't use the same resume for every job you apply for, right? So why use the same self-description for every conversation?
Right, tailor it to your audience. She actually tells this great story about a guy named Roberto, who was a master of crafting these different verbal resumes.
Oh, tell me about him.
Well, he'd basically tweak his presentation for every job interview, emphasizing different skills and experiences depending on the specific role he was going for.
Smart. Playing to his strengths for each opportunity.
Exactly. And guess what? He ended up negotiating a much higher salary because he knew how to showcase himself in the best possible light.
That's amazing. Proof that the right communication strategy can make a real difference.
And get this, she even brings in her hairdresser to illustrate the point. Her name is Gloria, and she apparently changes how she describes herself depending on, well, who's sitting in her chair.
I love that. A hairdresser is like a walking, talking masterclass in communication, aren't they? They have to connect with so many different people all day long.
Right. So for the older ladies, Gloria talks about blue rinses and perms, keeping it classic. But for the teenagers, it's all trendy cuts and highlights.
She's instinctively adapting her message to resonate with her audience. So smart.
Makes you think, what's your nutshell resume? How would you describe yourself in a way that's both authentic and engaging?
That's a great question to ponder. It's all about figuring out what makes you unique and presenting it in a way that captures people's attention.
Okay, now let's talk about something that might seem a bit obvious, but it's often overlooked: vocabulary. Lowndes is a big believer in, well, having a good one.
Words matter. It's true. They can have such a powerful impact on how others perceive us.
And, it doesn't mean you have to start using super complicated words, but she argues that having a rich vocabulary can make you appear, well, smarter and more creative.
Right. It's about choosing words that add nuance and depth to your communication, not just using the same tired phrases over and over again.
And here's the good news. She says it only takes about 50 new words to make a significant difference. 50 words, that's doable, right?
Totally doable. It's about replacing those overused words we all rely on with more evocative alternatives. Like instead of saying something is good, you could say it's exceptional, outstanding, or remarkable.
It's like finding those little ways to add a bit more sparkle to your language. Now, gentlemen, pay attention, because Lowndes has some specific advice for you when it comes to, well, complimenting women.
Oh, I'm curious to hear this. Compliments are a tricky art to master.
Right. It's so easy to fall into those generic compliments like, you look great, which, it's nice, but it doesn't always feel, well, heartfelt or specific.
Exactly. And Lowndes really stresses the power of descriptive language. She says instead of just saying, you look great, try using words like elegant, stunning, or radiant.
It's about painting a picture with your words, making the compliment feel personal and meaningful.
Right. Those words evoke a feeling, an image. They're much more impactful than a simple, you look great.
Okay, now, are you ready for one of Lowndes' signature moves?
Bring it on.
She calls it communication. And it's all about, you guessed it, the power of you.
You, as in how you use it in a conversation.
Exactly. She's basically saying that starting your sentences with you can make people feel more engaged and receptive to what you're saying.
That's interesting. I never really thought about it that way.
Right. So, for example, instead of saying, can I take Friday off?
Hmm.
She suggests saying, boss, can you do without me on Friday?
Oh, I see. It's subtly framing it as a challenge for the boss, like a little test of their leadership skills.
Exactly. It appeals to their sense of capability and importance, making them more likely to grant your request.
Clever.
And Lowndes explains that this technique works because of what she calls the pleasure pain principle. People naturally want to avoid thinking too hard.
Makes sense. We're all a bit lazy sometimes, right?
So when you frame things in a way that's easy for them to grasp, well, they're more likely to say yes. It's like you're making their decision easier for them.
I like it. A little psychological nudge towards your desired outcome.
And this technique can be used in all sorts of situations, not just asking for favors. It works for compliments, asking for directions, really anything where you want to get someone on your side.
It's like a secret weapon for persuasion and engagement.
Now, are you ready for another big cat move? This one's all about smiles, but not just any smile, the exclusive smile.
Okay, what makes this smile so exclusive?
It's all about making each smile feel personal and genuine, not just some generic, pasted on grin. She actually tells this story about this guy on a cruise ship who she calls Strobe Man.
Strobe Man. That sounds ominous.
He had this big flashy smile that he flashed at, well, everyone, but it was the same smile every time. So instead of feeling warm and inviting, it just felt, well, kind of robotic.
Like a default setting rather than a genuine expression.
Exactly. And Lowndes argues that we need to tailor our smiles to each interaction, letting them grow organically from the conversation and the connection we're building.
It's about being present and engaged, not just going through the motions.
Right. And here's a fun fact. A study at the University of Missouri actually found that smiling can increase your chances of someone approaching you by like 40%.
Wow, that's a significant boost.
Huh.
The power of a smile should not be underestimated.
So not only does it make you more approachable, but it can also be the key to, as Lowndes puts it, engineering an acquaintance.
I love that phrase. It's like you're intentionally creating opportunities for connection.
Okay, now let's talk about something that can really make you stand out in a conversation, or maybe make you blend in, and not in a good way.
Clichés. Clichés. The bane of any good conversation.
Lowndes is not a fan. She says, big cats, avoid them like the plague.
And I can see why. They just signal a lack of originality and make you sound, well, a little bit dull.
Right. It's like using those tired old phrases we've all heard a million times before. Busy as a bee, happy as a clam. Come on, we can do better than that.
I think we can. So what's the antidote to cliché overload? How do we freshen up our language?
Lowndes encourages us to be more creative, to come up with our own unique expressions and comparisons. She talks about this radio broadcaster named Barry Farber, who's famous for his, well, let's call them unconventional similes.
Okay, give me an example. I need to hear this.
So apparently, he once described feeling nervous as being like an elephant dangling over a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy.
Wow. Now that's an image that sticks with you.
It's so much more evocative than just saying nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof, right? It makes you stop and think, Visualize the absurdity of it all?
It's like he's jolting us out of our linguistic complacency.
Exactly. And Lowndes encourages us to collect memorable phrases, quotes, and similes that we can use to, well, spice up our conversations.
It's like building a mental library of linguistic gems that we can pull out at just the right moment to add some sparkle.
Okay, are you ready for another big cat power move? This one's short and sweet. Call a spade a spade.
Oh, I like this one already. Straight talk, no beating around the bush.
Lowndes is a big believer in direct and straightforward communication. She argues that big cats don't hide behind euphemisms or sugarcoat things.
So it's about being confident and assertive in your communication, saying what you mean and meaning what you say.
Exactly. And she points out that euphemisms can sometimes come across as pretentious or even, well, a bit cowardly.
I see her point. Sometimes they can make you sound like you're trying to avoid something uncomfortable or awkward.
Right, like you're not being fully transparent.
So what are some examples of big cat language versus, let's call it, little cat language?
Well, she gives a few examples, like saying breasts instead of knockers, or rich instead of wealthy. It's about using language that's clear, concise, and to the point.
It's about owning your words and not shying away from the truth.
Now, let's talk about a situation that can be really tricky, even for seasoned communicators. Delivering bad news.
Ah, yes, that's never fun. No one likes to be the bearer of bad news.
But it's a part of life, right? So how do we do it gracefully in a way that doesn't, make things worse?
Well, Lowndes has a great technique for this called it's the receiver's ball.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Break it down for me.
Think of it like playing catch with someone. You wouldn't just hurl the ball at them without, considering their position or if they're even ready to catch it.
Right, you have to gauge their readiness and throw the ball in a way that they can actually catch it.
Exactly. And it's the same with delivering bad news. You need to be mindful of the recipient's emotional state and adjust your delivery accordingly.
So it's not just about the message itself, but the way you deliver it, taking into account the other person's feelings and perspective.
Precisely. Lowndes actually shares this funny story about a neighbor who cheerfully announced, like with a big grin, that it was going to rain on the day she had planned a picnic.
Oh no. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Right. It wasn't the rain itself that was so upsetting, but the neighbor's complete lack of awareness of how the news might be received.
It's like they were oblivious to the fact that they were dropping a bomb, even if it was a relatively small bomb.
Exactly. And Lowndes says that a big cat would have delivered that news with a more sympathetic tone, acknowledging the disappointment and maybe even offering some alternatives.
It's about being mindful of the impact your words have on others, even when you're just sharing information.
So instead of just blurting out, hey, bad news, the picnic's going to be rained out, a more empathetic approach would be something like, oh no, I just saw the forecast and it looks like there's a chance of rain this afternoon. I'm so sorry. I know you were really looking forward to your picnic. Maybe we can reschedule for another day.
It's about acknowledging the potential for disappointment and offering support or a solution.
Exactly. It's about showing that you care and that you're not just throwing information at someone without considering their feelings.
Now, what about those situations where you're dealing with someone who just won't let a topic drop? They keep asking intrusive questions about something you really don't want to talk about, and you're not sure how to politely shut down the conversation.
Ugh. Yeah, those can be awkward. Like you've tried dropping hints, changing the subject, but they're laser focused on getting the information they want.
Lowndes has a brilliant technique for this. She calls it the broken record technique.
Okay, that sounds promising. I have a feeling this involves repetition.
You got it. It's so simple, yet so effective. You just repeat the same phrase over and over again, like a broken record, until the other person gets the message.
So you're essentially wearing them down with your unwavering consistency. I like it.
She gives an example of a client who was going through a messy divorce, and people kept asking her really intrusive questions about it.
Oh, I can imagine. People can be so nosy sometimes.
So instead of engaging with those questions or getting flustered, she just kept repeating the phrase, "We've separated, but the company's unaffected no matter what they asked."
It's brilliant. She's setting a clear boundary without getting into the nitty-gritty details that she doesn't want to share.
Exactly. It's a polite but firm way to shut down the conversation without being confrontational or rude.
It's like having a mental shield that deflects those intrusive questions.
Okay, so we've talked about handling awkward questions, delivering bad news. Now let's shift gears and talk about something a little more fun, celebrity encounters.
Oh, this is juicy. I've always wondered what the big cat approach to celebrity encounters would be.
Right, so imagine you're at a restaurant, you look up, And there, at the next table, is your absolute favorite celebrity. What do you do? Do you rush over for an autograph, a selfie, try to strike up a conversation?
I think I'd probably freeze up. It's hard to know how to act in those situations. Do you play it cool or do you gush about how much you love their work?
Well, Lowndes actually advises against making a big fuss. Remember, celebrities are people too, and they deserve their privacy, especially when they're trying to enjoy a meal or some downtime.
Right, they're not there to perform for us. They're entitled to some peace and quiet.
Exactly. So no rushing over, no gushing, no interrupting their dinner.
But what if you really want to express your admiration? Is it ever okay to approach them?
Lowndes suggests a more subtle approach. She says to wait until they're leaving and then briefly approach them with a genuine compliment. But here's the key. Compliment their recent work, not something from years ago.
Ah, I see. So show them that you're a current fan, not just someone who's stuck in the past.
Exactly. And if they're with a companion, be sure to include them in the conversation.
Good point. It's a sign of respect, acknowledging their entourage and not just focusing all your attention on the celebrity.
Okay, are you ready for one last communication tip before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive? This one is so simple, yet so powerful. It's all about the two little words we use all the time. Thank you.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the secret to saying thank you like a big cat?
It's this. Never let those two words stand alone. Always follow them with for.
Really? So instead of just saying thank you, I should say thank you for, and then be specific about what I'm grateful for.
Exactly. It elevates those two words, makes them feel more genuine and heartfelt.
I can see how that small addition would make a difference. It's like you're putting more thought and intention into your gratitude.
Right. It's like you're really acknowledging what the other person has done for you, whether it's a big gesture or a small act of kindness.
And Lance gives this example of saying, thank you for getting us here, to the pilot when she gets off a plane.
I love that. It's such a simple but unexpected gesture, and I bet it makes the pilot's day.
I think it would. It's a great reminder that a little bit of gratitude can go a long way in creating positive connections.
And that's a great note to end on. We've covered so much ground in this first part of our deep dive, from crafting your nutshell resume to the power of the exclusive smile and the communication technique.
And we've learned some valuable lessons about delivering bad news with empathy, setting boundaries with the broken record technique, and even how to handle those starstruck celebrity encounters.
But there's still so much more to discover. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into Lowndes' insights and strategies for becoming a true communication master.
Okay, so picking up where we left off with How to Talk to Anyone, Part 3, Lowndes dives into some pretty interesting strategies for, well, let's call them conversational finesse.
Ooh, conversational finesse. I like the sound of that. I think we could all use a little more of that, right?
Absolutely. And one technique that stood out to me was what she calls kill the quick me too.
Kill the quick me too. That sounds a bit aggressive, doesn't it?
It does, right. But it's actually about being a better listener. See, Lowndes argues that when someone's sharing something personal, a story, an experience, we often have this knee-jerk reaction to jump in with our own Me Too moment.
Oh, I am so guilty of this. It's like I can't help myself. Someone starts talking about a trip they took, and I'm already launching into my own travel tales.
I get it. It's tempting to relate, to connect, but Lowndes suggests that holding back can actually make you more memorable.
Really? So by not jumping in with my own story, I'm actually making a stronger impression.
It's counterintuitive, right? But think about it. When you resist that urge to hijack the conversation, you're showing the other person that you're truly listening, that you're interested in their experience, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
That makes sense. It's like you're giving them the space to be the star of their own show.
Exactly. And she tells this funny anecdote about a time when she was chatting with someone about, of all things, skiing.
Skiing. Okay, I'm picturing Lowndes on the slopes. This should be good.
She was going on and on about all the resorts she'd visited, really getting into it. And at the end of her monologue, she finally asked the other person if they ski.
Drum roll, please.
And the guy casually mentions that he has an apartment in Aspen.
Oh, no. Can you imagine all that talk about skiing?
Yeah.
And she totally missed the opportunity to connect with this guy on a deeper level.
Exactly. If he had just blurted that out right away, it wouldn't have had nearly the same impact. By holding back, he created this sense of mystery, of intrigue, and when he finally revealed his Aspen connection, it was like, boom.
It's like a well-placed punchline.
It's all about creating anticipation, letting the other person savor their moment in the spotlight. It's a subtle way to show that you're paying attention and that you value what they have to say.
So the next time I'm tempted to jump in with my own me too, I'm going to channel my inner big cat and resist the urge. Let the other person shine.
Okay, here's another interesting point that Lowndes makes. Big cats never tease.
Wait, really? I've always thought of teasing as a playful way to connect with people. What's wrong with a little good-natured ribbing?
Well, even if it's meant to be lighthearted, teasing can sometimes come across as insensitive or even hurtful. Not everyone appreciates that kind of humor.
True, some people are more sensitive than others, and what might be funny to one person could be offensive to another.
Exactly. And Lowndes points out that teasing can sometimes undermine your credibility, especially in professional settings.
I see. It can make you seem less serious, less mature, less trustworthy, maybe.
Exactly. It's about creating a positive and respectful environment where everyone feels comfortable and valued without the fear of being made fun of.
So, while teasing might have its place in certain relationships, it's probably best to err on the side of caution, especially when you're first getting to know someone.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that, well, no one really enjoys talking about. Delivering bad news.
Ugh, yeah, that's never fun. Whether it's a missed deadline, a project setback, some other unpleasant announcement, those conversations are always tough.
And Lowndes, being the communication guru that she is, has some advice on how to do it gracefully, using that it's the receiver's ball technique we talked about earlier.
Right, being mindful of the other person's emotional state and all that.
Exactly. And she uses this example of a neighbor who cheerfully announced, like with a big smile, that it was going to rain on the day she had planned a picnic.
Oh no, not the picnic.
And again, it wasn't the rain itself that was so upsetting, but the neighbor's complete lack of awareness of how that news might be received.
Right, it's that oblivious cheerfulness that makes it sting even more.
Exactly. It's like, hey, I know you're really looking forward to this, but tough luck.
So instead of just blurting out the bad news with a smile, how should we handle these situations?
It's about acknowledging the challenge, offering support, maybe even brainstorming solutions together.
Like if you have to tell someone that a project has been delayed, instead of just saying, hey, bad news, the project's been pushed back, you could try something like, hey, I know this is going to be frustrating, but we've hit a bit of a snag with the project and it's going to be delayed. Let's talk about how we can adjust the timeline and make sure we can still deliver.
Perfect. You're acknowledging the frustration, you're offering a solution, and you're framing it as a team effort.
Now, let's say you're dealing with someone who, well, they just won't take a hint. They keep asking you intrusive questions about a sensitive topic, and you're not sure how to shut down the conversation politely. What's the big cat move in that situation?
Ah, yes, the art of deflection. Lowndes has a brilliant strategy for this. The broken record technique.
Okay, I'm starting to sense a theme here. Lowndes loves her analogies.
Right, but they're so effective. So with the broken record technique, you just repeat the same phrase over and over again, like you guessed it, a broken record, until the other person finally gets the message.
It's like you're creating this impenetrable wall of words.
It's a polite but firm way to set a boundary without getting into a lengthy explanation or justification.
I remember this example from the book about a woman who was going through a messy divorce, and people kept asking her all sorts of intrusive questions about it.
Oh, I can imagine those questions. People can be so nosy, especially when it comes to personal matters.
So instead of getting flustered or defensive, she just kept repeating this phrase, we've separated, but the company is unaffected.
Smart. She's not engaging with the drama, she's just stating her position and sticking to it.
Okay, so we've talked about handling awkward questions, delivering bad news gracefully. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something a little more, well, glamorous. Celebrity encounters.
Oh, this should be fun. I think we all have those fantasies of running into our favorite actor or musician.
So imagine you're at a restaurant, and suddenly, there they are, at the next table, your absolute idol. What do you do?
Part of me wants to rush over and gush about how much I love their work, but another part of me thinks I should play it cool, act like I'm not totally freaking out.
It's a tricky situation, right? Well, Lowndes actually advises against making a big fuss. Remember, celebrities are people too, and they deserve their privacy, especially when they're trying to enjoy a meal or some downtime.
Right, it's their personal time, and we should respect that.
So rushing over for an autograph or a selfie is probably not the best approach.
But what if you really want to express your admiration? Is it ever okay to approach them?
Lowndes suggests a more subtle approach. She says to wait until they're leaving and then briefly approach them with a genuine compliment. But here's the key. Compliment their recent work, not something from years ago.
Ah, I see. So show them that you're a current fan, that you're paying attention to their latest projects.
Exactly. And if they're with a companion, be sure to include them in the conversation.
Good point. It's a sign of respect, acknowledging their entourage and not just focusing all your attention on the celebrity.
Okay, are you ready for one last communication gem from Lowndes before we wrap up this second part of our deep dive? This one's all about expressing gratitude in a way that really makes an impact.
I'm all ears.
It's this. Never let the words thank you stand alone. Always follow them with for.
So instead of just saying thank you, I should say thank you for, and then be specific about what I'm grateful for.
Exactly. It elevates those two little words, makes them feel more genuine and heartfelt.
It's like you're putting more thought and intention into your gratitude.
Right. Instead of just a generic thank you, you're acknowledging what the other person has done for you, whether it's a big gesture or a small act of kindness.
It's about making those two words count.
And remember Lowndes' example of thanking the pilot for getting her safely to her destination.
I love that example. It's so unexpected, and I bet it makes the pilot feel appreciated.
It's a great reminder that a little bit of gratitude can go a long way in creating positive connections. But that's all we have time for in this part of our deep dive. We'll be back with part 3, where we'll explore even more of Lowndes' insights and strategies for becoming a true communication master.
All right, diving back into part 3 of How to Talk to Anyone, I'm really struck by how Lowndes emphasizes this idea of being your own PR agent.
Your own PR agent, huh? So we're all basically walking, talking brands.
That's the idea. She's saying we should think of ourselves as brands and, craft those verbal resumes we talked about, tailoring them depending on who we're talking to.
Right. Just like companies have different marketing strategies for different audiences, we need to figure out what resonates with each person we meet.
Exactly. And this applies to, well, pretty much every aspect of life. Professional networking, making new friends, even dating.
It's about being strategic with your self-presentation, highlighting the aspects of yourself that are most relevant and appealing to each person you encounter.
And she brings back her trusty hairdresser, Gloria, as a perfect example of this.
Oh, Gloria. She's like a communication ninja.
Remember how she talks about blue rinses and perms for the older ladies, but switches to trendy cuts and highlights for the teenagers?
A true master of adaptation. She's not being fake or anything, just understanding her audience and adjusting her message accordingly.
So think about your own nutshell resume. If you had to describe yourself in a few sentences, what would you say? How would you tweak that description for different situations?
It's a great exercise for self-reflection and for honing those communication skills. Speaking of honing skills, let's talk about vocabulary. Lowndes is a big believer in having a substantial one.
Words matter. The words we choose can have a huge impact on how others perceive us.
Right. But, it can be intimidating to think about expanding your vocabulary. Where do you even begin? Do you memorize the entire dictionary?
Not at all. Lowndes actually says it only takes about 50 new words to make a noticeable difference.
50 words. Okay, that feels much more manageable.
Right. It's about choosing a few overused words that you rely on, like good or nice or smart, and then brainstorming more evocative synonyms.
So instead of just saying something is good, I can say it's exceptional or outstanding or remarkable.
Exactly. It adds a little more nuance and precision to your language, makes you sound more, well, articulate and engaging.
All right, guys, listen up. Lowndes has some specific advice for you when it comes to, complimenting women.
Compliments are a delicate art, aren't they? It's so easy to fall into those generic compliments that, while well-intentioned, don't really pack a punch.
Right, like you look great. It's
Yeah.
nice, but it doesn't always feel, heartfelt or specific.
Lowndes is all about ditching the generic and going for something more descriptive, something that evokes a feeling or an image.
So instead of you look great, what kind of words does she suggest?
She encourages men to use words like elegant or stunning or radiant to really make a woman feel seen and appreciated.
It's about moving beyond the superficial and complimenting qualities that truly resonate.
Right, it's about celebrating their inner and outer beauty, making the compliment feel personal and meaningful.
Okay, let's revisit one of Lowndes' power moves that we talked about earlier. Communication.
Yes, the power of you. Starting your sentences with that magic word to instantly engage people and make them feel considered.
It's such a subtle shift, but it can make a big difference in how your message is received.
And remember, it works because it taps into that pleasure pain principle that Lowndes talks about.
Right, people want to avoid thinking too hard.
So when you frame things in a way that's easy for them to grasp, they're more likely to be receptive to your message. It's like you're doing the cognitive heavy lifting for them.
Okay, now for a topic that no one really enjoys talking about, but that we all have to deal with from time to time, delivering bad news.
It's never easy to be the bearer of bad tidings, is it?
But sometimes it has to be done. So how do we do it in a way that's, as painless as possible for everyone involved?
Well, remember Lowndes' technique, it's the receiver's ball.
Right. It's all about being mindful of the recipient's emotional state and adjusting your delivery accordingly.
Instead of just blurting out the bad news, take a moment to consider how the other person might be feeling and frame the message in a way that's both honest and empathetic.
So it's about acknowledging the challenge, offering support, and maybe even brainstorming solutions together.
Exactly. It's about showing that you're in it together, that you're not just dropping a bomb and then walking away.
Okay, now let's say you're dealing with someone who just won't take a hint. They keep asking you intrusive questions about a sensitive topic, and you're not sure how to politely shut down the conversation. What's the big cat move in that situation?
The art of deflection. Lowndes has a brilliant technique for this. Remember the broken record technique?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. It's so simple, yet so effective.
You just keep repeating the same phrase over and over again, like a broken record, until the other person finally gets the message.
It's a polite but firm way to set a boundary without getting into a lengthy explanation or justification.
Exactly. It's about staying calm, staying consistent, and not letting the other person's nosiness derail the conversation.
Okay, so we've talked about handling awkward questions, delivering bad news gracefully, and setting boundaries. Now let's shift gears one last time and talk about those, well, slightly surreal moments when you find yourself face-to-face with a celebrity.
Yes, celebrity encounters. Those moments when you suddenly feel like you've stepped into an alternate reality.
Imagine you're in a restaurant minding your own business, and there they are, sitting at the next table, your absolute favorite actor, musician, whoever. What's the big cat move?
Part of me wants to, rush over and gush about how much I love their work, but I also know that celebrities are people too, and they deserve their privacy.
Right, they're not there to perform for us. They're entitled to enjoy their time off without being bombarded by fans.
Exactly. So what's the right approach?
Lowndes suggests waiting until they're leaving and then briefly approaching them with a genuine compliment. But, and this is key, compliment their recent work, not something from years ago.
Oh, right. It shows that you're a current fan, that you're paying attention to their latest projects.
Exactly. And if they're with a companion, be sure to include them in the conversation.
Good point. It's a sign of respect, acknowledging their entourage and not just focusing all your attention on the celebrity.
Okay, ready for one last communication gem from Lowndes? This one's all about expressing gratitude in a way that really makes an impact.
Bring it on. I'm always up for a good dose of wisdom.
It's this. Never let the words thank you stand alone. Always follow them with for.
So instead of just a generic thank you, I should say thank you for, and then be specific about what I'm grateful for.
Exactly. It transforms those two little words into something much more meaningful and heartfelt.
It's like you're putting more thought and intention into your gratitude, acknowledging the specific action or gesture that you appreciate.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Leo Lowndes' How to Talk to Anyone. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've learned so much about the art of communication.
Me too. It's amazing how those subtle tweaks in our communication style can make such a big difference in our interactions and relationships.
Lowndes really does a brilliant job of breaking down those nuances and giving us practical tools for becoming more confident, engaging, and persuasive communicators.
And the best part is, these are skills that we can continue to develop and refine throughout our lives.
So as always, thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and exploration. We hope you've gleaned some valuable insights that you can use to enhance your own interactions and create more meaningful connections. And of course, thank you for listening to The Deep Dive.